Imagine waking up one day, and literally the entire visual language of your country. We're talking the buildings, the paintings on the walls, even the plays you go see on a Friday night has just completely fundamentally transformed. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we are exploring a massive pivot in history. We're going to dive deep into exactly how the 1898 shift in colonial rule utterly reshaped the cultural and visual landscape of the Philippines. You see, when the United States took over from Spain, they didn't just swap out the flag flying over the capital. They radically changed what the cities looked like, what the paintings felt like, and honestly, the very nature of mass entertainment.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, the 1898 cultural shift. Then, building the city beautiful. Third, chasing the golden light. Fourth, from protest to pop culture. And finally, remixing past and present. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the 1898 cultural shift and how a totally new era begins. Now, this transition into the 20th century, it wasn't just some polite political handover. It was a rapid, intense, physical, and psychological overhaul. By 1898, the U.S. arrival brought entirely new systems of commerce, education, and civic life. But get this, the real catalyst for dramatic physical change happened between 1899 and 1902. The immediate aftermath of war brought on severe public health crises. We're talking widespread, devastating outbreaks of cholera and tuberculosis. This actually forced a total redesign of urban spaces just to keep people alive. And at the exact same time, there was massive cultural pushback. By 1901, tensions were so high that the U.S. government passed the Sedition Act, specifically to crack down on the performing arts and silence rebellious playwrights. Ultimately, in just a few short decades leading up to 1935, Philippine art rapidly shifted away from these dark, dramatic anti-colonial images toward bright, modern, and highly commercialized themes.
Moving on to Section 2. Let's look at building the city beautiful, focusing on architecture and urban planning.
So, under Spanish rule, architecture was inherently defensive. It was heavy, it was religious. Think about the massive, imposing stone walls of Intramuros. They were built to keep enemies out, but inadvertently, they basically trapped all that oppressive tropical heat right inside. It was a very claustrophobic atmosphere defined by the ornate Spanish Baroque style. But then, almost overnight, the core philosophy of what a building should even do just completely flipped. The American colonial era brought in concrete government buildings, sprawling open parks, and wide avenues. Imagine walking out of a heavy, dimly lit walled fortress and stepping out into a vast, tree-lined boulevard. And this wasn't just for aesthetics, right? These open spaces were specifically engineered to provide ventilation, circulate fresh air, and fight back against those devastating health crises we just talked about. This whole shift was part of a much bigger philosophy called the City Beautiful movement. It was spearheaded by this legendary urban planner, Daniel Burnham. He's actually the exact same visionary behind the iconic layouts of Chicago and Washington, D.C. Burnham had an incredibly pragmatic mindset. He honestly believed you could combat public health crises and societal unrest, not just with medicine or police, but with expansive, breathable, orderly civic spaces. He famously redesigned major centers, like Manila and the mountain city of Baguio, to reflect this exact ideal, literally embedding wellness and order straight into the city grid. And this obsession with order, it brought the neoclassical style front and center in Philippine infrastructure. Picture grand, perfectly symmetrical concrete buildings with towering columns, triangular pediments, and those massive, expansive stone steps. Master Filipino architects like Juan Arellano and Antonio Toledo fully embraced and really perfected this style. And there's a fascinating psychological reason for this design. Those incredibly tall columns weren't just there to hold up roofs. They were intentionally designed to project a specific aura, civic order, transparency, and the unshakable strength of democratic institutions. It was architecture explicitly designed to make you feel like you are part of a structured, modern society.
Okay, Section 3, Chasing the Golden Light. Let's talk about painting and the visual arts.
Just as the cities were opening up and breathing, the emotional mood on canvas completely flipped as well. The Spanish and Revolutionary eras, they were defined by blood, sweat, and heavy romanticism. You really only have to look at the dark, turbulent, awe-inspiring energy of Juan Luna's famous masterpiece, the Spolarium, to feel the immense weight and conflict of that time. But as the American era took hold, art suddenly became heavily commercialized. Tourists, new business owners, and textbook publishers, they all wanted something pretty to look at and to sell, so the canvases literally brightened up. The heavy drama was swapped out for sunny, idyllic scenes of traditional life and peaceful rural field workers. Art transformed from a tool for dramatic historical narrative into a highly marketable, feel-good commodity.
This massive commercial demand ended up birthing the renowned Amersolo school and a stunning artistic technique known as luminism. Now, luminism is all about using bright, golden backlighting to perfectly capture the exact warmth and glow of tropical sunlight. Master artist Fernando Amersolo used this technique in masterpieces like Planting Rice to project this serene, almost utopian version of the Philippine countryside. It essentially stripped away the harsh realities and backbreaking work of agricultural labor and replaced it with a glowing, peaceful ideal. It created a powerful aesthetic that honestly still heavily influences how the Philippines visualizes its own heritage even today.
Section 4. From protest to pop culture. Let's shift over to literature and the performing arts.
So early on in the American occupation, the theater was literally a battleground. Playwrights like Aurelio Tolentino wrote what was called seditious theater. These were traditional stage plays known as zarzuelas that secretly hid anti-US messages right in plain sight. It's actually wild. They used clever symbolism, double meanings, and they even specifically colored the actors' costumes so that when they stood together on stage in a certain way, they secretly formed the banned Philippine flag. It was so incredibly effective and deeply subversive that the U.S. government had to pass the Sedition Act of 1901 just to arrest actors and shut these performances down. But as colonial control stabilized and time went on, mass entertainment took a sharp pivot away from secret resistance, shifting heavily toward imported Western pop culture.
This pivot gave rise to vaudeville, which is basically a localized version of American vaudeville. Instead of intense religious pageants or these dangerous subversive plays, audiences started flocking to the theaters for pure, unadulterated escapism. We are talking uproarious comedy acts, blaring jazz music, tap dancing, magic shows, and very soon after, the absolute magic of early Hollywood cinema. The theatrical stage completely morphed from a space of solemn religious reflection and fiery political protest into this vibrant, dazzling hub for lighthearted mass entertainment.
And finally, Section 5, Remixing Past and Present. Let's synthesize this whole art history journey.
When we take a step back and look at this entire historical journey, a very clear pattern emerges across every single creative discipline. Painting brightened significantly to sell a serene, tourist-friendly lifestyle. Architecture opened wide up to promote public health and project the power of democracy. And theater shifted away from a tool of political protest into a streamlined vehicle for pop culture. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that art does not just happen in a vacuum. It aggressively and constantly adapts to the economic, political, and societal needs of its specific time. Now, to truly grasp how these profound historical shifts shape us today, there's this brilliant educational exercise that's often given to grade 6 students. It's called the History Remix. It actively challenges students to prove that these concepts aren't just dead facts trapped in some dusty textbook. Instead, they are the very DNA of how modern culture continues to evolve and adapt right at this very moment.
The activity itself is elegantly simple, but highly profound. Step 1. One student draws a historical background, maybe those grand neoclassical concrete columns, or a vibrant landscape bathed in Amersolo's golden luminism. Step 2. Another student steps in and draws a distinctly modern activity right in the foreground. Kids riding e-bikes, swiping on their smartphones, or standing around eating local street food like fish balls. Finally, Step 3. They work together to write a rationale that beautifully bridges the two eras. By intentionally crashing something historically distant into their immediate modern reality, they learn how to decode visual art step by step.
This isn't just some cute drawing exercise, right? It's about building immense confidence in critical observation. It forces us to look much closer at the layered world around us. But most importantly, it fosters a deep, enduring respect for how culture continuously evolves. It proves that adapting to outside influences, remixing the old with the new, has always been and will always be a core part of the national story.
Because culture never stops moving. It merely finds a new canvas. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really ponder. Look around at the mobile apps you use every single day, the architecture of your local town, the media you binge watch on the weekends. How might future generations take all of this and remix our current cultural habits to create entirely new forms of creative expression? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating era of transformation with me. Keep analyzing and keep learning.